So welcome everyone to the session on mindfulness, samasati. The Pali word for mindfulness is sati. So this mindfulness, we've probably, I know for sure, if you're coming to this group, you've heard of mindfulness, and in fact, many of your friends and relatives have probably heard of it as well. It's kind of a mainstream or even popular term with many different meanings, and it's, I think, also the doorway really to the Dharma for many people. They'll start off with some mindfulness training of some kind, and then sort of get curious or have some kind of opening, some kind of realization, and then want to dig deeper. I kind of hesitate to use the term as much as I used to because it's got so many meanings now in popular culture. But it is essential to this practice. It's one of the main real drivers of the practice, but it's also only part of a larger picture. And sometimes it's presented as, being most of the picture or even all of the picture. So one thing that's interesting to recognize at a very basic level is, mindfulness brings us into the present moment. And an interesting study by Matthew Killingsworth and Daniel Gilbert found that a wandering mind is an unhappy mind. That, when I saw that, it blew me away to see a very rigorous study. They've followed 250 odd thousand instances of experience using cell phone technology. They also found that on average, we spend 47% of our time with a wandering mind. So a wandering mind is an unhappy mind, and we spend 47% of our time in that state. So we're thinking about something other than what we're doing. And this wandering mind typically makes us unhappy. It doesn't matter what it's wandering onto. It makes us unhappy. And I think that, that's really giving us a sense of disconnection. We're not fully present for our life. And it's a kind of we have this filter or cloud that's not allowing us to directly experience. And a wandering mind is often in a state, some form of clinging, grasping, pushing away. So old habits are being reinforced and strengthened. So mindfulness, which is, a key part of insight meditation, is about really coming out of that and seeing things clearly. So it's really a shift, and you could say a radical shift in how we relate to our experience. To what's arising. We just, in the guided meditation, we went through, thoughts, body sensations, and then everything that's arising, just noticing it moment by moment, and then noticing what's our sense towards it, our feeling tone, or vedna is the Pali word. What's our vedna towards what's arising? And it's fine if it's pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. that just happens, it arises, but do we go into grasping, aversion, and clinging? So the real task, I think, of right mindfulness is to reveal our direct experience as it is before all the concepts and interpretations and judgments arise. So it's allowing us to be with that direct experience in the moment, and directly as it is, to the sense doors, sensory experience, before we add all the narrative and storytelling that the mind adds to it. So I want to cover a bunch of things. I thought when I started into doing the topic of mindfulness, of course, I brought up on my computer screen all the different talks I've done over the years on it. Started looking at them, and then I thought, I'm gonna see if I can practice with this and maybe take it a little further, not just in a way give a standard talk on mindfulness. And I really discovered the richness of the practice and the reason the Buddha made it so central. So I got a bunch of themes. I don't know how many we'll get to tonight, but one is mindfulness is not meditation. Sometimes there's that misconception that it's something we do all the time. We practice all day. And in fact, we can even practice it in our sleep. So it's not just meditation. The second is mindfulness is not just about paying attention. So a burglar is paying attention, right? Probably quite carefully so that they don't make noise and get caught. So a burglar is paying attention. There's something more with mindfulness. There's a reflectiveness. There's a knowing that we are knowing. There's an attitude of that neither opposes or favors the object to which one is aware. So there's these other elements. You could say the other elements in many ways are the other elements of the Eightfold Path, but it even goes beyond that. The third is that mindfulness alone is not enough for deeper insights and realizations about truth to arise. It must include, we've talked about this, right effort, investigation, which we talked about in terms of the 7 aspects of enlightenment, awakening, and right intention, and so on. So mindfulness alone is not enough. And the final one is mindfulness allows us to be in a less conflictual relationship with life. This allows us to not be in that struggle with life when we're conscious that we can be less conflictual with what's arising. When we're unconscious, of course, we're on what sometimes is called autopilot, and our old habits are just being played out. When we're conscious or when we're mindful, we can notice this feeling tone arising of pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. Ah, there it is. Maybe we even notice a desire arising, but we can just let it flow through. We don't have to contract around it. And when we have this less conflictual relationship with life, it enables life or God or Buddha nature, whatever you want to call this, to really become conscious of itself. So in a way, you could say life is using our consciousness to become conscious of itself. So I'd like to ask you, and one thing I've learned, I'm going to ask you, how you define mindfulness, what it means to you. And one thing I've learned over the years is that there's really no right definition. That you could ask a room full of Dharma teachers this question, and you'd get different different answers. So it really depends on sort of how you integrate it into your practice, that what definition forms for you. So yeah, I'll throw that out there as a question, how you would define mindfulness, what it means for you. Yeah.
So when I think of mindfulness, I think of the word noticing. So it's like being aware and noticing, kind of my thoughts and what's happening and my reaction to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would say the same thing. To me, when I think I'm being mindful, I'm just being aware of what I'm doing and paying attention. And when the stray thoughts pass through, I try to just let them go and go back to chopping the carrots or whatever I was doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And resonating with the word noticing, I want to take it to it's an active noticing. There's no passivity attached to one's mindfulness, and a noticing of the ever-changing nature of phenomena as they arise and pass, and all the minutia that's attached to that noticing as well.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. So there's your typical definitions out there for sure. John Kabat-Zinn, who I guess you could say is responsible for popularizing the term with mindfulness-based stress reduction, she started doing in the late 70s, but then it really took off, I think, in the 90s, defined it as a practice of paying attention purposefully in the present moment, non-judgmentally. So he added a few things there. He added intention, and he added the attitude of non-judgment. So having an allowing attitude, and then of course the present moment. And I think the way you described it, the people that answered was, it's about paying attention to what you're doing in the present moment. And I think that's it's a clear part of the definition. Without that, it's hard to say it's mindfulness. You just, what is happening in this moment? What do I see? What do I hear? What sensations are present? And then the next is an allowing attitude, this non-interference with what's arising, this acceptance or non-judgment. We're not trying to change what's arising, we're just noticing it, letting go with acceptance into the present moment, to the suchness, like this is it, this is what's arising. Because it is, rather than the present moment, we tend towards conceptual proliferation about what's happening, right? We tend towards that papancha, as the Buddha called it, that proliferation of storytelling, narrative interpretations, decisions, judgments about what's happening, so that we're so far from the direct experience. There's just this wall of symbols and concepts that we're no longer actually engaged with what's happening. I wrote something here, and I'd like to. I was sitting at the computer rattling away, and then I wrote this paragraph, and I went back and read it, and I'm not. It made way more sense than I ever have. So I thought it came from almost like somebody else wrote it. So what I wrote was, in our everyday mode of consciousness, the mind begins a process that begins with some sense impression that takes place in the present moment. The mind, however, does not stay in the present moment. Instead, it launches from this immediate sense impressions like sound, body sensations, thoughts, and so on, to a variety of mental constructs such as judgments, interpretations, and commentary. This immediately removes the mind from the experience of the direct sensory experience. The mind very quickly seeks to interpret the sensory object using concepts, symbols, and interpretive schemes to make it understandable. In the end, the original direct sensory experience has been supplanted by ideation, and the present moment experience disappears under dense layers of concepts and views. So for me, that kind of sums up what happens when we're not mindful, and points to kind of the importance of being mindful, so that we can stay with the original direct sensory experience. So we see beyond the symbols, concepts, and habits of the conditioned mind. So we're no longer seeing them at with that cloud or at a distance. We're directly engaged. So I think that's so key. And I'll talk a little bit. It gets deeper when you say, so what? It's why. What's so great about direct sensory experience? I kind of like thinking about everything. So what why is this important? We need to get to. The other part is purposefully. We're doing it with intention. So you need to sort of, what is your intention for doing it? Is it to cultivate wholesome states of mind, skillful states of mind, to decrease suffering and stress, increase a sense of peace and happiness, or to attain truth, know things as they truly are, not as they are constructed due to our conditioning. So I'm going to throw another question out there. What is the function of mindfulness? Like, why do we do it? Why do we stay with the direct sensory experience? Why is it helpful or important? It sounds like such a simple question, but there's a depth to it. Yeah. Yes. Go ahead, Annabelle.
To give an objectivity to our experience. The proliferation is so often negative, and what's that mental process that leads to depression that cows do? I can never remember the word. I can't remember. Thought spinning. is so often-
Rumination.
Sorry?
Rumination.
That's the one.
Rumination.
It stops the rumination.
Yeah.
I think too, it makes for more honest relationships with those around us. If we're not going through our heads, making up stories about why they did something or what they were thinking at the time, I just think it helps in having a wholesome relationship with those around us. We don't go off on storylines. We just see people more for what they are in front of us. So for me, it's important for that too.
Yeah. Yeah, so living our life as it actually is, since it's happening in the present moment. So being a sense of honesty towards what's arising. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Alan.
I mean, for me, definitely, it's part of seeking the truth and not being in a state of delusion, seeing things as they really are. But for me, there's also a part, and maybe it's a lot like what Maureen is talking about, related to connection, feeling connected. I mean, certainly to others, but connected to life, connected to just what's going on, and maybe connected to the divine in some way, and just feeling alive. So for me, those are kind of important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm. Yeah.
You mentioned that an unfocused mind is an unhappy one at the outset. So for whatever reasons that is. So when we're mindful, we're happier, we're less stressed.
Yeah. There was a wandering mind is unhappy. Yeah, the mind's thinking about something other than what it's doing at the moment, which is good, which is the opposite of mindfulness, right? Which apparently we spend 70% of our time doing. So, yeah. Other functions of mindfulness, why we stay in the present moment, non-judgmentally. So we're being with what's happening. That sort of came up with we're being present for our lives, right? Because your life only happens in the present moment. So any thoughts you have about the past or the future are just imagination. So it's being present for your life, and we spend a lot of time in the past and the future. I bet if the study I mentioned really looked at it, that there'd be a lot of past and future, which leads to rumination and can lead to all kinds of anxiety and depression and so on. So there's that aspect of it. We reject the present moment in so many ways by pushing away what we don't want, to avoid unpleasant experiences. We may distract ourselves, we may numb ourselves to the present moment even. We do a lot of distraction. That's why, silent retreats can be difficult, because there's no talking, no reading, so no TV, no phones, smartphones, no, these are all our methods of distraction. I think that the phone is perhaps the penultimate distraction instrument. We numb ourselves with drugs, alcohol, and so on to the present moment. We grasp. So we want more of the pleasant. We seek to control things and people so that we can have more of these pleasant moments. So yeah, it takes us. It can take us out of that grasping and aversion mode of being, or way of acting, right? By being present, it can take us out of the grasping and aversion that creates stress. And that's basically the Four Noble Truths, right? The clinging, grasping, and aversion create suffering or dukkha or stress, unhappiness. So as you said, it does this for several reasons. We miss life in our life as it is in the present moment. So there's a sense of disconnection with life, with our engagement with the miracle of our life. It creates misery because we're always struggling with what is, or really with what already happened. We're constantly struggling with what just happened, right? Which creates real misery for us. And it can create this kind of imbalance, this feeling off-centered, off-kilter. We don't feel centered, grounded. We're always pushing and reaching. And just that when you hear those words, pushing and reaching, you can kind of see how that isn't it doesn't have a sense of centeredness to it. And it reinforces a sense of a separate self. That conceptual thinking proliferation just reinforces that sense of self that needs to control and protect. Yeah. So why do you think I say that mindfulness is not enough?
Because I think with mindfulness, you're just doing the knowing. What to really get to the dirt of it, you got to do the investigation of what arises. Oh, okay, there's a pain in my toe. Is it a pulsing pain? Or, is it a dull pain? Has it disappeared? Is it here now? And that, that's okay, this was in that moment. That was a form of suffering, and that's past, and that's understanding the impermanence of it. But if you just, oh, my toe hurts. Oh, now my shoulder hurts. Oh, now I'm thinking. You're not digging into that and exploring that experience to truly understand. That's my thoughts.
Thank you. Anybody else? This is really central to our practice. Because we can spend decades being mindful and a little bit happier perhaps, but not a lot changes. Yeah.
So maybe another important factor is the intention, that you realize what you're doing it for, and you're not just doing it for yourself. You're not just being mindful so that you'll be happier, but you're being mindful so that you're better in the world around you. To me, that seems important too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seems also that the investigation aspect is important, because if you're just aware and not thinking and not processing it, then you're just sort of living in a void. You're just sensory stimulus and ideas and thoughts are passing by, and you're not engaging with it, and that's not living really. I think it's really processing what you're noticing in a healthy or wholesome way is part of truly living.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Annabelle.
Well, applying values and I don't want to use the word judgment, but it's what's coming to mind, discernment to what you're finding is essential. Or I think it was Anita just said something that sort of came across as it can become cold and without, there's got to be heart to it.
Mhm.
Sorry, I'm not expressing myself well this evening. So stop there.
Yeah, there's got to be heart to it. Says a lot, actually. Yeah. Bringing a heartfulness to our mindfulness can be very key. So mindfulness is not enough. I mentioned at the beginning, a burglar pays attention to the present moment, right? Probably a rock climber is probably paying attention to the present moment, or a surgeon, right? You would hope your surgeon is paying attention to the to your innards as they operate. But are they practicing mindfulness? I mean, they could be, but in a general sense, likely in the way that I would describe it, and the way I think you've described it, it's they may in one sense be being mindful, but in many ways they're not being mindful. So the kind of awareness that we involve in mindfulness is profoundly different from the kind of awareness we use in our usual mode of consciousness. Right? There's a reflectiveness, I think, and another word that I think was used was an investigative component to it. So it's kind of not, it's not mindless mindfulness. It's there's a intention to and that both of these intentions came up, an intention to know the truth of what is, and an intention to connect with what is in a heartful, compassionate, engaged way. Right? I mean, those are quite different intentions than what a burglar might have, or a rock climber, even though they're being very focused on what they're doing. Bhante Gunaratana, who's my teacher's teacher, it's a Sri Lankan monk, says that mindfulness comprises three fundamental activities. It reminds us of what we're supposed to be doing. So if we're sitting in meditation, for example, we come back to the focus of the meditation. If we're washing the dishes, it reminds us to be focused on washing the dishes. So that's kind of the common, you could say, definition of mindfulness. And if I talk to somebody at a get together, thinking back to get-togethers when we had them a year ago, and I might talk to someone. No, I almost have to say, if I talk to somebody in a video conference and ask them what mindfulness is, that's what they would say, right? They're paying attention to what they're doing. So that's the first thing that Bhante G says is what it is. Second is, in mindfulness, we see things as they really are. So that's what I was pointing to in that paragraph that I read, is not clouded by our concepts and proliferations. So our thoughts have a way of kind of passing over reality, passing over the way things really are. And all our concepts and ideas distort that direct sensory experience. So we talked about that a little bit as well. And thirdly, he says that mindfulness sees the true nature of phenomenon. And this is really when we're talking about seeing the truth of reality, or seeing true nature. And he coins this in terms of seeing the three marks of existence, which is it's imperfect. It's the dukkha, that it's impermanent, temporary, always changing, and that it's egoless or selfless. So that the mindfulness helps us see those, the true nature of phenomenon. So those three things really comprise what Bhante G sees as a definition of mindfulness. So you can see it goes way beyond really some of the popular usages of the term, because it's getting right into the deepest of the Dharma teachings. So it goes way beyond bare awareness, way beyond paying attention. It goes to the context and to the reality of what we're paying attention to. So it's really drawing from all the other aspects of the Eightfold Path, right? Right views is in that definition, very much so. Right thought, right intention, and so forth. So if we divorce mindfulness from the Eightfold Path, it really takes it out of its context, its roots. And it could actually reinforce unwholesome qualities of mind, and could reinforce a sense of a separate self. Right? If all it is paying attention, you can do that all day and not see things as they really are, see the true nature of phenomenon. It could actually reinforce a separate self, especially a sense of a separate self. And, we could be observing something because we want something to go away. Right? We could be, where we, if we're observing because we're interested in understanding how things really are, then wisdom can arise. But if we're observing to change ourselves in some way or to fix something, then it's just reinforcing a sense of a self. Bhikkhu Bodhi, who does a lot of translations of the suttas and commentaries, wonderful if you're looking for direct, ever want to read the suttas directly. His translations are quite good, and as well as his commentaries, Bhikkhu Bodhi. He says, in the proper practice of right mindfulness, or samasati, sati, which is the word for mindfulness, has to be integrated with clear comprehension. It must be guided by right view, right intention, the ethical factors, and right effort. So it's the ethical, he's brought in the ethical factors as well. You could say the 5 precepts, or the right action, right speech, and so forth, that are on the eightfold path. So it really has to be seen within the context of those other path factors that we've been discussing. It's so crucial to see it within that context. And I think that's why it's lost some of its meaning in popular culture, because it's been divorced so much from the deep aspects of the practice. It's just seen as, I'm washing the dishes, and that could be helpful because at least you're being present for your life. But in terms of the other, seeing the truth and so on, it's really kind of missing that aspect. So I use the word to be conscious a lot. I don't know if you've noticed in the weeks I say, to check in to see if we're conscious in this moment. And consciousness, to be conscious to me is to be paying attention to the present moment, and to be aware and know that we are aware. Right? We're knowing that so there's an awareness that we're paying attention, awareness that we're aware. And it allows us to differentiate, and that's what it really allows us to do our investigation and to see the 3 marks of existence: dukkha, anitta, and anatta. And I'd say most of you, I'd say all of you, but I'd say most people, and I think probably everyone that's here tonight, if you're taking the time to come to a session like this, I would say you've had a momentary experience of a mode of consciousness that is beyond our normal mode of consciousness. You've had a taste of that deep presence which it can be a nanosecond of this sense of such a deep presence where there's a clarity and a comprehension that's present. And why I say I think you've all had it is because that's really the impulse that brings us to this practice. It's the impulse towards enlightenment comes from this taste, momentary seeing. Right? It's you could say it becomes a transcendent impulse. And what I mean by that is it's an impulse that comes from, not from a self, but from something beyond the self, the egoic self. It's a transcendent impulse. It comes without your consent. I think I've said in the past that, you know, your practice gets to a point that you're not controlling it any. There's no control. It's running you. It's chasing you. You're not chasing it. You're no longer the seeker. It's like you're almost the prey. You're being, you're just being you're in the flow. You're in the stream, the Dharma stream, not the egoic stream. And we think that the thing that's getting in the way of it is the ego, right? We think the thing that's getting in the way of us seeing the things as they really are is the ego. I forget who said, I had a teacher once that said, the ego is the ultimate spiritual fall guy. I love that. When I heard it, I thought, that's true. Anything goes wrong, it's the damn egoic mind. It's the ego. And we sort of blame it like it's an actual thing. But there's no thing called the ego. In fact, the ego creates nothing. That's interesting. What the ego does is it's constantly negotiating with what's arising in different ways, right? In the present moment, the ego is constantly negotiating with what's arising. That's that pleasant, unpleasant, neutral feeling tone that's arising. Then the ego kind of goes, okay, what do I do with this now? I desire, grasp, push away. It's constantly negotiating and maneuvering with what's arising. Sometimes the ego might get angry. Why is this happening to me? And anger arises. Sometimes the ego might get sad, and so on. It's in this kind of struggle with life. And as we practice, we become less conflictatory. That's not a word, is it? We become less conflictatory with life. We struggle less with life. That's a word. Actually, conflictatory is a pretty good word. We become less conflictatory as life, right? As we practice more and more, there's less conflict. The ego's not negotiating and trying to control so much the present moment. And can you see that all that proliferation that's arising is this struggle with what is, the ego negotiating with what's arising, controlling, protecting, and so on. So really, the ego is a verb. It's not a thing, it's a verb. It's a doing. It's this negotiation with what's arising. And we're not trying to escape that. You could actually say it's a blessing. We can become aware of that whole process occurring, and it's through seeing that whole process occurring, and that's why I keep bringing this up. It's this seeing. We're not trying to escape it. We're wanting to see it and penetrate it deeply, to become conscious of it as opposed to unconscious of it. And it's through this, as we start to see it, in many ways, you could say that, you know, consciousness is wanting to become conscious of itself. And it's through seeing how the ego reacts and negotiates with what arises that consciousness can become conscious of itself. And this is the shift that we call awakening, which is very different from being mindful. Mindfulness is just a really small part of that whole process. Now I know I've gone way down a road. I don't know if you came with me down that road, and you don't need to believe that some of what I said is, if you haven't had the experience with it, you don't need to believe what I'm saying about it. You simply need to see that mindfulness is within that context, and as you practice, you'll start to see more and more how it's, how the egoic mind is actually a blessing. We're not trying to get rid of it, we're seeing it, and with our mindful practice, we actually see how it's operating, and it's this kind of self-awareness or capacity for awareness of it, that consciousness becomes life. I guess you could say life or God or Buddha nature becomes conscious of it, of itself. That's all that awakening is that element arising. And for that, you need more than just, bare attention. We're in that process letting go of this sense of a separate self. Yeah. One, just to wrap up, another way that you can explore sati or mindfulness is the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And I was, kind of thinking about it this week, and I revisited the 4 foundations of mindfulness, which is often one of the first teachings that we get when we come to this practice. And, it's mindfulness of the body, and the Buddha gave all these different practices about how to be mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of the elements, the earth, air, so on, mindfulness of all the parts of the body, and so forth, and mindfulness of mental formations, which we practiced, which includes emotions and thoughts and so forth, images. And then kind of mindfulness of dhammas, which gets translated in different ways. I kind of see it as mindfulness of everything else, including the hindrances, and it just, he breaks it down as a lot of all the categories of the teachings, but I think it's just, it's mindfulness of everything. So, and then in there, it's actually the second one is mindfulness of feeling tone. I thought, and I've always wondered this, it's like, you've got, body sensations, thoughts, everything, and feeling tone singled out. I thought, well, this is interesting. Why is feeling tone, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, singled out? So I thought, well, I'm going to spend the week meditating on feeling tone. I'm just going to sit and open to everything, and then I'm just going to notice the arising of how pleasant, unpleasant, neutral just arises without my consent, just a natural flow. Just notice it, open again, notice feeling tone. And I was really, kind of astonished at how quickly feeling tone arises, and how often, and how there's just so much energy associated with it. And see how we kind of get sucked, how the egoic mind gets sucked into grasping and pushing away that pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. And you could actually see the energy. I could see the energy starting to arise and pull. In fact, at some points I could actually feel pleasant. I could actually feel like my body was being pulled forward, pulled into it, like there was some kind of energy pulling me. So that a practice that we can, that I hope that's what we did in the guided meditation. If that resonated at all, it may take a few tries at it to get a sense of it, but you're really just being aware of so you say, body sensation, body sensation in my toe. So you feel the body sensation, you notice it. Then is there what's the feeling tone with it? Or thought arises. What's the feeling tone? The feeling tone is just pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, or like, dislike, wanting, don't wanting. And what I also found was, as the mind settled and my meditation got deeper, more and more sensory experience had a neutral feeling tone. Interesting, eh? So as I settled into deeper meditations, in a way, equanimity arose, right? It was more of a neutral sense towards what was arising. So that was interesting as well. So I invite you to play, to explore that, because we usually do choiceless awareness is, body, sounds, thoughts, emotions, everything, and then we end. But we never couldn't find a meditation where they went into feeling tone, yet it is one of the 4 foundations of mind. Are people familiar with the 4 foundations of mindfulness? Yeah, a little bit, yeah. So different. Okay. So yeah, I'll end it there. Any questions about right mindfulness, or comments or questions about anything else? No, somebody shared oh, go ahead, Alan. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I just had one question about
Mm.
what you had said about Bhante Gunaratana and the 3 points there. And the second 2, as I understood them, were seeing things as they really are and seeing the true nature of phenomena. And I'm struggling a little bit to see exactly what the distinction is. So I wonder if you might just add a little bit.
Okay, I'll go back to his exact wording here. Somewhere on here. No. Okay. Yeah. The first one, we all, just paying attention to the present moment. The second one is seeing things as they really are, unclouded by thoughts and concepts that distort our direct experience. Right? So we can, mindfulness can remind us to sort of come back to what we're actually doing, but we can still have, be lost in thoughts and concepts about it. So we have the idea of letting go of being caught in a train of thought and coming back to the actual sensory experience. So it's that idea of, when you notice you're lost in thoughts, when we're in a meditative context, when you notice you're lost in thoughts, or you notice and you gently draw your attention back to, whatever it is, whatever the object of meditation is. So it's that notion of, you see the true nature of phenomenon by being directly with the sensory experience and not lost in thoughts and concepts about it. And then the third one is by being present for that sensory experience, we can investigate it and see its true nature. Selfless, impermanent, unsatisfactory nature. Yeah, it's quite an eloquent 3-step definition. Is that clear-ish? Yeah, hopefully clear. Yeah. Yeah, I can't emphasize enough the notion of being with the direct sensory experience rather than lost in the concepts about it, the stories about it. Yeah.
I'm starting to wonder if I'm spending too much time or energy investigating what I'm experiencing. Do you have any suggestions or guidance around discernment about that?
It's a really good question. We have these minds, which are great tools for analyzing, which is necessary and useful. And we can sometimes bring that to our practice and call it investigation. But in investigation, in the Dharmic sense of the term, isn't analysis. It's non-cognitive seeing, right? So when we see directly, and it arises as an insight or a realization. So yeah, there could be a tendency to, not so much over investigating, but perhaps investigating in an analytic, seeing the word as meaning analysis, when in fact the word isn't, it's non-cognitive, our investigation. It's this, the seeing is the doing. That's a really good question, because I think many of us get caught in that. I find myself getting caught in that when I'm doing Dharma, preparing for Dharma talk. And at one point, it was a few weeks ago, I had a lot going on and the mind was contracted and stuff. And, one way I was distracting myself was to sit down and write Dharma stuff. And I thought, I might as well watch, Schitt's Creek on TV. And there's actually some good Dharma in Schitt's Creek, but it's so we have to be very careful of that. So that's a deep and very helpful question. To see the true nature of phenomenon is not an analytic process. Just to see the truth is not an analytic process.
One of my favorite meditations by Josh Corda would have me believe that investigation is all supposed to be another level of observing the body. Like I notice I'm in fear, and then investigation would be feeling all the fear, the ways that fear shows up in my body, and how if I have a thought, what follows afterwards. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about? Or is there I guess the other thing I wonder is that on retreats, I often get insights about my own personal life that just sort of leap into my mind. Or is that what you mean in this case?
Yeah, so, well, I could say so much about that, the leaping into your mind. So that may or may not be useful stuff that leaps into the space of the mind, right? We tend to my experience is we may put more credence on it than it deserves. I can think back to retreats I did where, I think what leapt into my mind was to start a retreat center. And I spent the entire retreat planning and building and advertising, marketing, and this retreat center, right? And when I got home, it was like, that was a complete, none of this is going to happen. But at the moment, I thought this was like earth shattering insights, right? Like about what I needed to do with my life. So I'd be a little careful. Sometimes it's, we're distracting ourselves with those thoughts. So yeah, the leaping into mind, at least I find I take with lots of grains of salt. In terms of, so what this kind of non-cognitive investigation looks like, I guess to give you some examples. So you kind of touched on an example there. You feel into the body and you notice a feeling and you see a thought rise in connection with that body sensation. So that's part of it. You're starting to see how the mind and body are connected. And that in itself is an insight, right? To see that deep connection between the mind and the body is that's a part of an investigation. You might start to see how something arose and then all of a sudden it's gone and something else arises, and then all of a sudden that's gone and something else arises, and so you start to see that everything is constantly changing. It's constant. And the more settled you are into meditation, the more subtle the seeing of that change. So it's not only that things change moment to moment, but things are never the same from one moment to the next. Is a kind of a deeper level of that seeing. So that one really gets, at more subtle levels. Then you may see that you're doing a practice and you start to see that, this is just happening. I've got absolutely no control over what's arising next. Like it's just boom, there it is. You realize that, you say to yourself, I want a quiet mind, and you get a busy mind, or you say, whatever, you start to see. So those are, you're starting to see that. You start to see at a very subtle level that an intention will just arise as a bubble of a thought from nowhere, and then you can actually watch it morph into a developed thought, which then shifts into an action. If you can see that whole sequence, you start to see how your movements and actions are just happening. So that's a level of an insight. So I hope that gives you a flavor for how different investigation is from analysis. So you're not thinking about it and then running to your computer and Googling something. You really don't need, you can't Google any of this really. I mean, you can get somebody else's, theological or philosophical perspective on it, but no, it's not very helpful, actually. Yeah. Yeah, so that's the level that I'm speaking about of investigation. Yeah. And you keep seeing it over and over again. There's a repetitive element to it as well, right? Because you could see selflessness, and then kind of, oh yeah, or it might even be earth shattering, but then you forget and it happens again. This is why, in the teachings, I always talk about, get an understanding of it kind of intellectually, and then get a sense of it from your direct experience, from investigating it in your direct experience, to see that it's actually true. It's known as true. It's not just something your mind knows conceptually. You know it to be a truth. You've seen it in your direct practice, but then to integrate that into your life and live it and know that you know it, so that you don't have to keep having the same insight over and over and over again. Right? So once you've had that insight, I find some thinking is involved, for me at least. Maybe I'm doing it wrong, I don't know, but there's some thinking involved in kind of saying, okay, the insight gets processed by the mind, and then there's some decisions that arise on how that will change how I then live, how I engage with the world. I hope that's making sense. Yeah.
Thanks, Stephen. That
Okay, probably a longer answer than you wanted. I'm sorry.
I think I'm clearly doing far more analysis than I should be, or analysis. So thank you.
Well, that'd be huge if you stop doing that. It'd be huge. That's huge. Yeah. Yeah. Of course, maybe the analysis arises, but you'll notice it, right? Look, there's the mind wanting to analyze. Could be a form of distraction, or just because it's fun. Wow, time's flying. Those are really important questions, so I wanted to make sure that I was getting across, because that's the crux of the Dharma right there, right? That aspect of, it was brought up by several of you too, that mindfulness is not enough. It's only part of the picture, and that element that we just discussed is the key part of what needs to be done in addition to bear attention. Well, we covered a lot tonight. Hopefully I didn't burn out your dharmic brain circuitry. Yeah. Some people have been sending me emails, and I really don't mind at all if you have questions or queries about your practice, or even about readings or something. I really don't mind at all. And I also don't mind if you want to have a Zoom call as well. It's a small enough group that there's no problem. Yeah, no problem at all. Because we will be canceling next week for sure. We've got another couple. We've got a bubble of 4, so we're probably going to get together and do something that evening. Yeah, so I don't know if our plans are all going to be quite different, I'm sure, this year, but it is what it is. Lots of time to practice. Yeah.
Stephen, I'm wondering about New Year's Eve, the following Thursday.
Yeah, I am too. I don't have plans yet. I don't know what we're going to do. Yeah, woohoo.
Midnight sit. Midnight sit.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I
I
used to
can't
do
stay
the,
up till midnight.
I used to do a New Year's retreat for.
Yeah, I'm missing that. I've done that the last 3 years. So
Yeah. Yeah,
There's some good ones out there right now.
yeah. I don't know, can we, would people come to a New Year's Eve session? I mean,
I can't.
yes, no,
Maybe.
maybe, yeah,
I don't think I could.
no.
Not
Oh.
sure.
Yeah. Why don't, see, somebody said there's a 3-day retreat with True North Insight over New Year's. Yeah, they always do a New
Yeah.
Year's retreat. Yeah,
that's the one I've done the last 3 years up in Armhart.
yeah.
Nice.
Are we keeping you up, Anita? Just teasing. Yeah, so we'll definitely cancel next week and probably the next one as well. So I encourage you to connect with me if you have questions about your practice. If your practice is stalling out, connect with me and I'll see if I can help you out with it. I've helped people through stalled practice, or if you feel that you're at the cusp of something and just not quite getting to the next place, the next phase, or whatever you might want to call it, reach out, whatever it might be. It's helpful to have sometimes, especially when we're kind of alone like this and we don't have access to retreats and kind of our usual stuff, to be able to reach out and contact. It doesn't have to be me, but a teacher to get some guidance. Yeah. Yeah. Sound good? It's gonna be a while. I don't think I've ever had a 3-week break, two sessions, but 3 weeks from you folks. Go through a Sangha withdrawal. Okay, it's great to see you all, and take care, and happy holidays and
Holidays.
all that. Yeah. Be
Bye,
well.
everybody. Happy holidays.
Bye,
Thanks, Steve.
everyone.
Thanks, Stephen. Happy
Thanks,
holidays.
Stephen.
Thanks, Stephen. Happy
Stay
Happy
safe.
holidays,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank
Happy
you.
New Year,
Holidays.
everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.
Happy
Stay
New
well.
Year
Be
too,
well.
yes. Yeah.
See you next year.
Same time next year.